Hi, this is Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, the President, Founder, and Chief Listening Officer here at our network at USA Global TV and Radio. Thank you so much for your loyalty. Thank you so much to all of our guests, to our team members, to our sponsors, and to all of our elevated listeners. Here at USA Global TV and Radio, we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. We celebrate all of our team members, all of our guests, and all of our sponsors from around the world who come and lead their lives with their hearts to help other people walk into their greatness. If you'd like to be a guest on any of our shows, please go over to our website, usaglobaltv.com, and book your session. Please contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com and subscribe to our channel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us here at USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is Hot Topic. We will have several areas of discussion, but we're going to start off with what are the psychological autopsies with expert Kevin O'Doherty. I'm super excited. We've never discussed this topic on this platform. And as you know, we stand for education, hope, and inspiration, and a little bit of entertainment. Joining me is a dear friend and also one of our team members here. His name is Red O'Loughlin, and he is a TV show host here for our show, The Wise Ones, coming up later today. He's an expert presenter as a longevity strategist on our show, Talking Heads. He's also one of our elevated listeners. He's one of our panelists on our men's show, Wild at Heart. And he's also my book coach. So he's helped me get all 4 books to either #1 Amazon bestseller or #1 Amazon new release. Let's welcome him and find out what he's been up to. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. JACALYN. You're always very, very kind when you make your introductions. I feel so taken. I mean, I'm not even sure I have expressions for it this early in the morning in Houston, but regardless, I always truly enjoy them. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I've said this before, I don't know how you have time to do anything else when you're here so much, but you have a full life outside of this platform. And for people who are joining us for the first time, or maybe they're coming back and they want to know more about you, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll bring out our guest.
Well, many, many years ago, I was about 15 years of age, sophomore in high school, and I fell in love with chemistry. And I didn't get a chance to do anything other than get a degree in it, because as soon as I graduated from college, I got an invitation to Vietnam. And that kind of just threw my chemical career away. However, go ahead, many, many years. I put 31 years in the Navy. I got married, 54 years with my wife. A few years ago, my wife came down with breast cancer, and I was writing books and speaking on self-improvement, motivation, those kinds of things. And I changed my focus to what could I do to help my wife with regard to side effects. So I took my chemistry background and I started looking in the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking, what's causing these things to happen, cause and effect relationships. And I started tackling one thing after another. And we did a pretty good job of subduing a lot of the side effects of the chemo and eventually radiation. And so I shifted my focus from motivation into health and wellness, and more directly into longevity. And I've written a couple of books in that area with regard to what causes you to age, what causes disease in general, can you accelerate it, what happens, can you decelerate it? And so those are the things I write about. I write about it often. I have almost 1,000 original content articles on LinkedIn. I have about 1,500 on my website, and my speaking opportunities occur quite often, and that's generally something in the area of aging, anti-aging, health, nutrition. And then when I'm not doing that, I publish books for people, and that's kind of a quick and dirty. And so back to you, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you so much, Red. I'm really excited to bring out our guests. You know, I don't watch mainstream television anymore because we have all these streaming platforms, but I still love Law and Order, and I just am addicted to it. And I love when they call in the expert witnesses, and or they're going to the morgue to do an autopsy. I'm thinking, what is going on there? I want to learn more. So our guest is joining us from London, from the UK, and his name again is Kevin O'Doherty, and he is a psychologist and expert witness. He's also psychological autopsy. He's got courses courses. He's got all kinds of ways to educate people on these very interesting subjects. So let's bring him out without further ado. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for speaking with me today.
It's our pleasure. And you heard what I said, hopefully backstage, that this is kind of an area that I'm really excited to learn more about. It just seems so, I know the word glamorous doesn't really fit it, but to get into somebody's mind, to be able to help people, and also to be able to go into a courtroom and everybody's looking at you and they're all folk, wow, this is an expert witness. So tell us how you got involved in doing these things.
Well, I've been a psychologist for about probably almost 30 years, I think. And I got involved in expert witness work probably around about 18 years ago. So typically it began where solicitors, or you would call them lawyers and attorneys in the States, got in touch with me and said, could you do an assessment, a psychological assessment for our client who's applying for leave to remain in the UK or for asylum here in the UK, and they have experienced all sorts of very unpleasant things back in their own country. Could you assess for us how that impacted on that person, and how are they at the moment mentally, and crucially, what would the psychological impact on them be if they were to be returned to their country of origin? So I quickly became fascinated in that kind of work as soon as I got into it. And it's almost like detective work. And you gather all of the evidence just like detectives. And you look at the person's background, their medical history. You do a standard psychiatric interview, a psychological assessment. All sorts of information is gathered. And then you write the medical legal report. And then the lawyers, the attorneys, use that in helping the person to be successful in their application for asylum here in the UK. So that's really how I became involved in that kind of work. Prior to that, I think I've been working in mental health since I was probably about 20 years old, which is a good few years ago now. So I've worked with a broad spectrum of mental health issues with clients.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever attended a physical autopsy?
No, I haven't. I've read lots of physical autopsy reports and toxicology reports. And when I do a psychological autopsy, it's expected that I would read those along with the deceased's medical records, sometimes employment records. I interview their families and friends, their co-workers, things like this. And as I said, toxicology reports as well. So I gather all of that information, but no, I haven't been to a physical autopsy, and I'm not sure I would like to. I don't mind. I don't mind seeing the brief sketch in the movies, Criminal Minds and stuff like that, where you just see a snapshot of it, but nothing gruesome. I don't think I would fare very well in the actual physical autopsy.
It's fascinating. Kevin, what are some of the key findings or areas in which you've had to testify?
It would normally be, in the UK, we call them immigration tribunals. So where I've actually appeared in court is largely in relation to immigration applications for asylum, for example. And this is where I present my report to the court, and I get cross-examined and I'm asked lots of questions. And basically I have to justify my findings by pointing out to the evidence that I've had access to, and given the reasonings behind my my statements in those reports that I write. And that was daunting at the beginning, having a lawyer or barrister, we call them here in the UK, and solicitors cross-examine me and really put me on the spot and ask me to justify my findings in the reports. But with more experience, that kind of anxiety subsided, and now I kind of thrive on that because I quite enjoy that.
I love that, how you took something that was a challenge and you made it into a strength.
Yeah, sure.
I noticed that when you go back, you have a certain period of time in your bio that you provided. You talked about 6 months or a year, you go back in that person's life. Generally speaking, do you see that they've kind of been that way for a long time and then just kind of exponentially blew up, or is it a gradual shift in somebody's personality or mindset? What do you typically see?
It kind of depends on the individual. There are some patterns that we do see. For some people, they have perhaps had mental health issues that have been unrecognized, undiagnosed for a number of years. And that can be seen once we start looking back at the medical records and the symptoms and reports from their families and things like this. So sometimes there are no previous diagnoses that we can say, oh, okay, that played a part in what eventually happened for this person. For other people, it can be, the stresses and strains of life. It can be the end of a relationship, the end of their career. It can be the diagnosis of a serious physical health issue. And for some people, that can be kind of, it can be too much to take without adequate support in place. It's quite often the case that when we look back in the previous 6 months of the deceased's life, it's quite often that we find that they have reached out or tried to reach out on several occasions, but either couldn't access the help that they needed, they couldn't afford the help that they needed, the intervention, or they just sometimes weren't listened to. And that's quite tragic looking back and finding that, because things could have been very different for that individual had they been able to access the help, support, and very often psychiatric intervention that they needed at that time.
Thank you, Kevin. I was wondering, in your bio also, a number of your clients have been tortured or subjected to violence, and you've been in this field for so long. How is it that you deal with this over and over again?
Yeah. I mean, initially when I began doing expert witness work and I began hearing some of the stories and the reports, of the things that people are subjected to, I remember feeling quite horrified with that. And I'm still horrified with it as well. And I remember thinking, why can't people just be nice to each other? Why do they have to do this? I guess I was quite naive. But as time goes on, I think, to be honest, I've developed a bit of a thick skin, and I have a number of coping strategies that I use to help me kind of keep on an even keel, as they say. And I do try to take a kind of a clinical detached approach to the work that I do. I always try and have the compassion, I make sure that I maintain that compassion and, the empathy. But at the same time, for myself and for the benefit of families of the deceased, I have to maintain that clinical detachment and gather the facts on each case, so that I can think clearly and present the evidence without any emotions on my part.
I really admire that. I'm a certified coach. And when I first started coaching, I would be like sobbing. Like, you have to get it together. Like, you can't show this emotion. But over years, you do learn to try to keep everything within so that you can do the work. But also, a question I have is, if we push the feelings down, then somehow they come up at some later time in our life. So what are these techniques that you use so that you're not pushing it down, you're actually not reacting on it, but dealing with it at the same time?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I do, certainly in the UK, psychologists are expected to have clinical supervision. I think it's the requirements or the recommendations are 1 hour of clinical supervision for every 20 hours of clinical work that we do. So I meet with a clinical supervisor who's a psychiatrist, and I discuss the cases that I'm working on at the moment, any stresses or worries or concerns. If one of the cases has impacted me more than it usually would, I discuss that. And so it's my chance really to offload any worries or concerns or sadness as well that I experience with some of these cases. And I express that in a very safe environment, in a confidential, private environment, with somebody who specializes in providing clinical supervision to psychologists. That really, really helps. I do take a very methodical, detached, scientific approach to my work, but not in a cold-hearted way. And that certainly helps. And I also try and reason with myself. And I kind of remind myself that the reasons I'm doing this for is it's kind of helping that individual who has, in most cases, passed. For example, if I'm doing a psychological autopsy, in most cases they have passed. And I'm helping to shed light on that person's history. I'm helping to tell their story because they're no longer able to. I'm often helping to answer questions that have been left behind, and families, friends, and loved ones of the deceased have no idea why that person did this at that time and what led to that happening. So I help to kind of, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, and I'm helping to hopefully answer lots of questions in the best way that I can. And I think that can be quite cathartic. It can help the, I don't want to say closure, because I don't think there's any closure when it's difficult to have closure when you've lost somebody through suicide, for example, but helping family and loved ones to find answers, I guess. And that's very helpful.
Kevin, what do you see as the primary difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist there in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor, so he or she has to go through, I think it's about 6 or 7 years of standard medical training, and then they branch off into a specialism. So they branch off into psychiatry, for example. Whereas a psychologist would normally do a psychology degree of 3 years, then they would do a postgraduate qualification. For myself, I did a master's in forensic mental health. I'm also a CBT therapist. So then you get to call yourself a psychologist when you have that postgraduate training. Excuse me. And a major difference as well is that psychiatrists, because they have a medical background in the UK, they can prescribe medication for mental health issues, whereas psychologists can't.
So in that regard, do you offer some suggestions of how people can cope, get better, feel better through meditation, through yoga, through some other practices?
In terms of my work in mental health, for example, I'm also a CBT therapist, cognitive behavior therapist. So I do provide that as an intervention. Excuse me. I do also recommend, I can refer people on to different modalities where I think that might be useful. I myself practice Chinese Health Qi Gong, and that is excellent at helping me to manage my stress and kind of strains that come with the job. Very similar to Tai Chi. And I sometimes recommend that to people where I think that would be more beneficial than, for example, counseling or psychological intervention.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
I noticed your background there in the Chinese modalities of health. In some of the Toastmaster meetings I used to be in here in the States, one of the Chinese women got up and says a lot of Chinese mothers will name their firstborn son Kevin. And
oh, really? Oh,
yes,
that's nice.
And she was saying that it has a strong meaning of it. It was like victory or victorious or triumphant. And that is kind of the way they want to have their number one child lead others in there. So I wasn't aware if you were aware of that or not, but
no, I'm aware of the Irish meaning because it's originally an Irish name, apparently, Kevin. And with my background, my father is or was Irish. He's passed now. And Irish comes from a Gaelic name, Gaelic Irish name, and it means gentle, kind, and caring.
That's
So
beautiful. We do have a comment Hi, Tarek. Thanks for joining us. In dealing with refugees from different countries, how would you approach the language barrier, the difference of culture, and how it would influence your diagnosis?
Sure. Well, wherever needed, I have a whole range of translators that I will. Typically, lawyers will say to me, "This person only speaks Arabic or Gujarati or Hindi or Punjabi or German or French. Could you find a translator?" So I have a list of translators that I ask to be in on the assessment. I speak Spanish myself at an intermediate level, so I have a good understanding and I can do an assessment in the Spanish language as well. In terms of, so that's how I help to overcome the language barrier. In terms of difference of culture, I mean, living in central London, it's a very multicultural kind of society that we have here. And I hear all different languages every day, and I meet with people from all many different backgrounds. So I have a good broad understanding of cultural sensitivities on the whole. If there are any things that I'm not sure about, I will ask the translator beforehand. Is there anything I should be aware of when I'm doing this assessment with this person from that part of the world? Anything I should avoid? Anything I should be kind of, just cautious and aware of? So I do ask for feedback as well before the assessment so that I'm kind of in the know before we begin. Yeah, I hope does that answer the question?
I think so. Thank you so much, Tarek. If you have a follow-up question, please let us know. We appreciate you being here. Kevin, a question I have is I see you in the courtroom and you're getting grilled. I don't know if it's just on television, if this is how it is, but you're getting grilled and you're the expert. You have the facts, you know what it is, but yet they're trying to trip you up, the attorneys, the barristers. How do you keep your cool and just stay focused on point?
Well, I think it all starts at the stage of the assessment and writing up my initial report. And I'm always very careful not to make any comments beyond my own personal and professional experience. So I won't comment, for example, on neurological issues because I'm not a neurologist. I stick well within my own professional boundaries, topics that I know about and that I can present in court, for example. So that's the first thing that I do. I make sure that I only assess and comment on things that are within my speciality. And then hopefully when I do have to go to court and defend the report that I've written and be cross-examined, excuse me, I've made sure that I've done my homework beforehand. I read my report. I read all of the evidence that was provided to me, medical records, other medical reports, police reports, for example. And I make notes on that. And so when I actually go to the court, I have all this kind of, I have this deep understanding of that specific case. And I know exactly what I have said in the report and why I have said it. And I know what the evidence is that I can use to back me up on this. And so academic references, for example. So on the whole, I'm pretty confident in the courtroom, but I try to maintain a kind of a humility as well, because you never ever know when you can get caught out with something or caught off guard. And it is a difficult process because the barristers and lawyers have been in law for many, many years in some cases, and they have a whole range of strategies and techniques to sometimes try and trip you up or to undermine your evidence. And I think I just have to keep cool, speak slowly, don't raise my voice at all, don't react. I try and respond instead of reacting. And everything I say, I think about it for a second as well and make sure that what I'm saying is backed up by the evidence.
You use the term solicitors and barristers. It's a term we here in the United States. those are terms that we understand are lawyers, but what is the difference there in the courtroom?
In the courtroom, so solicitors on the whole can deal with civil cases and criminal cases that are less serious. So they would typically go to the magistrate's court here, where people can be, I think, sent to prison for a maximum of 2 years. So it's pretty low key offences and crimes, for example, and civil cases below a certain threshold. Whereas barristers, on the whole, go to the Crown Court, and the Crown Courts are for the more serious offences, for example. And the barristers are the ones, you might have seen them in the movies, they wear the white wig on their head and the black cloak, whereas a solicitor will usually just wear kind of conventional suit and tie, or a dress or a skirt, for example.
Appreciate that difference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Kevin, you also mentioned that in your work in building your case and doing the psychological autopsy, you interview a number of people. So you go from being interviewed in a courtroom to interviewing others. And I'm wondering, what have you learned? What are some key takeaways from what you've learned being an expert witness to what you've learned being an interviewer?
Sure. One of the big things I've learned over the years is in order to gather as much evidence and information from people as you can, it's important to put them at ease, not to make them feel defensive or threatened in any kind of way. So we always start off with kind of appropriate chatter, as we would say in the UK, where we just talk about some general things first of all: the weather, how are you doing, thank you so much, nice to meet you, and things like this. And we gradually ease the individual into the topics that we want to find out about. And I've learned that, you catch more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar, I think is the apt saying that we would have in the UK. So to have a nice sociable approach to the client rather than a confrontational, gathering evidence, cold and clinical kind of approach. And I think that's much more successful. And we gather much more information, and much more reliable information as well, that really comes from the person's heart. So I've learned that, that's for sure.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much, especially for us on this platform as well. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
The reliability you mentioned just a second ago, how much training do psychologists get when they're interviewing with regard to neuro-linguistic training or body language or facial expressions, and being able to decipher what are they saying is the truth or the whole truth, or whether they're just really, it's a facade that they don't want to talk about for whatever reason. Sometimes it's embarrassing or fearful or whatever.
We don't, as far as I know, or certainly I didn't in my psychological training, I didn't do any training in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, but certainly nonverbal behavior, kind of looking at facial gestures. We look at the tone of voice of the individual. We look at their demeanor. We look at the way that they walk into the consultation room. We look at how they're dressed. We focus on their eye contact when they're, giving evidence or answering questions. We're very aware of what they say and also what they're avoiding and what they don't say. And some topics they might expand on freely, whereas other topics they will answer yes or no, or yes or no. So that tells us a lot as well. But I think, to be fair, a lot of that has come from my experience over the years of interviewing people and being interviewed as well. And some of it is not tangible. It's difficult to put into words, and it's difficult to learn from a textbook. But there's a certain kind of a gut feeling that police officers will often tell you that, I don't know why, but I just know that this person's not telling me the full truth. There's more to this than meets the eye. And there is a gut instinct. It's almost like a second nature, I think, when you're interviewing somebody and you're paying very close attention. We pick up on these things. But interestingly, it's very important, I think, although I'm paying attention to these things when I'm interviewing somebody, I don't want them to see that I'm paying really, really close attention to what they're saying and how they say it and their eye contact and their body language, because that would be quite off-putting and it would be quite, quite threatening. But yeah, we do pay close attention to all of these things. I think it's important to.
Kevin, I was wondering, just as a follow-up from that, because you've been doing this for so long, you're so good at it. Do you find that you're doing it all the time? Are you able to take a break from it? So when you're just having a casual conversation with someone on the street, are you still in that psychologist mode?
I mean, I think I'm good at it. I think I'm good at it. I'm certainly learning a lot from the work that I do, and I'm always learning. I never reach the point where I think, okay, I've got these psychological assessments or psychological autopsies all sussed out. I have it all. I never get to that point. So I'm learning all of the time. And, I really appreciate the learning opportunities that I have. My work comes in peaks and troughs. I am busy a lot of the time, but then sometimes it will go very quiet for some unknown reason. When we left the European Union, for some reason, my work went quiet for about 5 weeks. I didn't have one email asking me to do assessments or psychological autopsies. And I thought maybe that's the reason why, because we've left the European Union, Brexit. And then it went quiet for a few weeks after COVID first broke out in the UK and we went into quarantine. But then after both of these events, the work quickly bounced back again. So I really don't know much. So my work is busy most of the time, but it does go quiet. So I do get time off. I'm very keen to do the very normal everyday things that everybody does outside of work. And that helps me to switch off from some of the heavy stuff that I have to deal with or some of the heavy stories I have to listen to.
I appreciate that, especially for our audience who might be in a field where they have a lot of emotional connection potentially, or they're showing compassion and empathy on a regular basis. You need to take time for self-care as well. And I want to make sure that we touch on the fact that you are a published author and you're also an educator. You have a number of courses that look quite interesting. So did you start doing this type of work at the same time that you're doing everything else, or did you cut out some amount of time? Just as an author myself, I know that if I didn't have Red to work with and keep me accountable, I don't think I would have ever gotten published. What has been your experience?
I mean, I started putting together online courses because it seemed to be the way that everything was going. I've also done a teaching qualification quite a number of years ago. And so back in, I think 2009, I put together, I came across this one platform, Udemy. It's an American platform. I think it's the most popular online educational platform. And at the time I thought, let me do an introduction to cognitive behavior therapy. Maybe nobody will buy it and I'll see how it goes anyway. I put that together and put it on the site. And I was shocked that it started selling straight from day one. Not a great deal of money, but anyway, years later, I've gradually over the years added courses on a whole range of mental health topics. And now I think at the moment I have about 15 or 16 courses. And they're all doing very well, actually. I have students all over the world that get in touch with me. So yeah, it kind of, the mental health work began before me creating these courses. And again, responding to student inquiries and questions and opinions and stuff like that, I set aside an hour every day to do that. And that also helps me to switch off from the clinical work that I do. So, and again, it's a very valuable learning experience to be asked questions by students, and students disagree with me as well. And I really value that, So yeah, that all works well.
So it's quite interesting because in addition to all these other things you're doing, you're also an entrepreneur because as an author and as an educator, and the part that I really like about that, I have some courses and also some books, is it's passive income, which is always fun when we see the sales coming in, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So because there are so many courses on Udemy, what's the best way for people to find your courses? Just to go look for your name?
Yeah, if somebody types into a search engine, courses by Kevin O'Doherty on Udemy, udemy.com, it should then take them to the introductory page, which has a whole bunch of information about me, the work that I do, my profile, and then it has all the different courses that I have created that are available on Udemy underneath that profile. And I would recommend them have a read through those different courses and see if any of them are going to be useful or suitable for them.
Wonderful. I think I've pulled up the courses. I've been trying to find them over here, and I think I have them. So if it's okay with you, I will
Yeah,
share the screen so people can see.
sure.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. All right, so we're going over to udemy.com. And let's see if I have the right page here. I think this is it. Okay, I'm over here, and this looks like it would be your course, is it? Introduction to CBT?
That's right.
Fantastic. Okay, and as we go down, is this also your course? Whoops. Why does this keep Introduction to Schizophrenia?
Yeah.
Okay, and Introduction to PTSD. Kevin, would you like to share any information about these courses with people who are watching and thinking, you know what, I need to go over and sign up for this?
Yeah, a couple of things I'd like to share. The very first course that I created at the top of your page, the Introduction to CBT, that was created when technology and web cameras and microphones are not at the same quality as they are today. So it's a little bit antiquated, and that's why I have lots of special offers on that. So very often it's almost just a few dollars to buy that course. All the other courses after that one are more, I don't want to say professional, but they're recorded with better equipment and the sound is better. The visual quality is much better. All of the courses are set at the level of introductory. For the person who's perhaps they're working in mental health, they're working in social care, they have a family member who has mental health issues, for example. So all of them are at the kind of introductory level, with the exception of the cognitive behavior therapy, the intermediate one, which is a later course. And that's a follow-on from the introductory CBT course.
And you said you have 15 courses here?
I think it's 15 online at the moment. I'm currently working on geographical profiling. So that's the next one I'll be
So exciting.
finished with.
Kevin, help me just a little bit. I see the first one there on the CBT. It says 6 total hours, 20 lectures, but I go down to the next one and it says 2.5 hours, 45 lectures or 46. I'm not sure. What does that really mean when I'm looking at? Is this like a 5-minute lecture or what? How is that broken down?
Yeah, because at some point after I created the first course, the Introduction to CBT, Udemy came up with some recommendations based on the average concentration and focus time of online students.
Okay.
And they recommended all their tutors keep their lectures and presentations to kind of 7 minutes maximum.
Okay.
So that's why there's lots of lectures with relatively short lecture time. Because of that recommendation, apparently they did research and found, concentration time is less than it had been thought previously.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Red. And let's also talk about your work as an author. And if you're able to read from one of your books for us, that would be great. I don't know if you have it right there. I should have mentioned it before, but
I don't have one present. I don't have one with me, but I think the most popular book, certainly by the number of people that buy it, is the thinking errors, introduction to thinking errors in cognitive behavior therapy. And that was my very first book that I wrote. And it really was a labor of love. And at the time, I was going through a challenging period, and I needed to remind myself of the importance of managing the way that we think in order to manage the way that we feel. And so in that book, I described cognitive behavior therapy, how it developed, and then I focused on the thinking errors, which is central to CBT. And it's a number of logical thinking errors that we all make from time to time. And these errors play a part in psychological distress or unhappiness. And so that book really helps people to begin to look at those thinking errors and use a number of techniques in order to begin to change some of those thinking errors in order to feel better. So yeah, that really was a labor of love, that book. And I still read it now. I have it as an online version. I don't think I have any paperbacks in the house at the moment.
You said you're involved with Chinese health and medicine, Qi Gong, you happen to mention. Have you written anything in those areas?
No, I haven't. And I try to stay away from areas that I don't know inside out in depth. I won't write on anything that I don't really feel confident about writing on.
Okay, so you've had lots of thinking errors, so you're pretty good about that one.
Absolutely. And
all of us.
I make them every single day. And I sometimes say, I should know better than to make that thinking error. But then I say, well, hang on, I'm a human being, And so no, absolutely. But with the Chinese Health Qi Gong, my wife and I began training in that. We began attending classes several years ago, and then we did some formal training last year. And it was online during the lockdown. And I don't know about in the States, but here in the UK, there are several periods where we had very strict lockdowns. You could only go out for 2 hours per day, and then you had to stay home. And it's during that time that I created lots of courses, and my wife and I attended intensive online Qigong training with people based all over the UK, and absolutely wonderful. And practicing Qigong every day, I think, helped us to keep our sanity during some very difficult times during the COVID lockdowns. It's very similar to Tai Chi. Tai Chi is perhaps more popular than Qigong, but actually Tai Chi comes from Qigong. Qigong is the root, and Tai Chi is an offshoot of it. Excuse me. And basically, it's slow, relaxed movements whilst we're in a mindful state, and we control our breathing, nice, relaxed, deep breaths. And we tend to have Chinese music in the background as well. And your movements are coordinated with your breath and also with the various stages of the piece of music that is for that set routine, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And can this be practiced anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one time where during one of the lockdowns, you're allowed to be out for 2 hours, whatever. And I took my rubber bands to the local park and I hooked them over a tree, and I was kind of working out. And then a couple of 3 hours later, I was practicing the Qigong in the park as well. And 2 police officers passed by and said, "Excuse me, sir, we saw you here about 3 hours or so ago. And do you know that the rules at the moment are that you can only be outside of your home for 2 hours per day because of the lockdown?" And I said, "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Time has just flown." And it was a genuine answer. It sounds like a bit of a jokey answer, but it was a genuine answer, because when you're practicing the Qigong, it's almost like a meditation. It's movement and meditation. And you really do kind of get into it and you lose track of time. And I think that's why it's so therapeutic. You become kind of immersed in nature almost, or I do anyway. I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to head right home right now." And it seems strange when I think back to that time that, police officers would kind of question you about being outside of your home for more than 2 hours, in the UK. But that was the time that we were in. But yeah, it certainly helped my wife and I to manage some of those, the psychological impact of COVID, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Red, have you practiced Qigong before?
In a different sense, when I go for a massage, I prefer what I call the Qi Gong kind of massage. It's a little bit different than some of the other ones. So, yes, I'm familiar with some parts of it, but not all of it. But when I have a choice of certain things, like I prefer a Japanese massage because I concentrate on the feet to start with, as opposed to the back and shoulders. But on the Qigong, that's a different kind of massage, a little bit deeper in some areas. So, from some aspects, yes, I'm aware of it. From the mechanical aspects and the meditation aspects that Kevin's talking about, that's an area I'm not well versed in.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm going to do some research. So thank you for sharing that. Kevin, as we come to the end of our show, I'm wondering, with all the experience that you have and all the people whom you've helped, and how would you say you've evolved? What are some of the changes in you, the evolution of Kevin as a result of doing this work?
I think over the years I've become gradually much better at managing my own stuff, if that makes sense. I'm much, much more aware of events in the world and how they impact on people. So, we can hear about war and civil war and oppression, and it doesn't really mean a great deal unless we put it into context and we speak with people who have experienced those issues. So I think basically it's a greater awareness of the world and the things that happen in the world, how to manage myself and my own stuff, and I think a deeper understanding of people and what makes people tick, I guess.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We
Sure.
also have two websites up here underneath your name, your contact information. Tell us a little bit about what people will find there.
Sure. On the calibergold.com, basically that focuses almost entirely on provision of training in mental health and psychological topics, and also my medical legal work. Whereas in the CG Forensic Mental Health, that focuses almost exclusively on forensic mental health issues, psychological autopsies, and there's a page there as well, a little bit out of context, but provision of online courses in Chinese Health Qi Gong.
Oh, wow. For the audio audience, our Caliber Health, Caliber Gold, I'm sorry, Caliber Gold is CALIBREGOLD. A little difference between the English UK version and the English American version of the word caliber. So for those people who can't see the graphic, it's CALIBREGOLD.com.
Yeah,
And I'm going to actually pull up one of the websites here. Let me take down this comment so we can do that. Is that all right with you, Kevin?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. Where did it just go? Give me a moment. It just disappeared. Carry on for 1 second. I don't know. Oh, here it is. It's right here. Okay. All right.
Need to talk to your production engineer about that.
Well, it shows that it's here, but then when I go to pull it up, it won't let me pull it up. I can see it, but it won't let me pull it back. Red, keep going if you would, please, while I figure this out. Thanks.
So when you're sitting around the dinner table, are you paying attention to your wife's facial expressions as she's telling you her day?
I remember when I first did my psychology degree, one of the teachers said, "Don't use psychology on family members or friends, so they won't thank you for it at all." So,
Okay, I'm over here. Can you see the screen?
yeah.
Okay. So first of all, is this the right website?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so if you'd like to walk us through here, just let me know where to go.
Yes, so there's several pages on there. At the top there, the directors. That's about myself and my wife. We're both the company directors of Caliber Gold Limited, and CG Forensic Mental Health is an offshoot of that. It's closely related. Also, there's a page in there about private psychological concierge. Basically, that's where clients get in touch. Where, for example, they want frequent one-to-one sessions with a psychologist. Perhaps their family member has been recently diagnosed with mental health issues, and they want to have that input on a frequent basis from a psychologist. So advice, support, advice on medication, psychological intervention, stuff like that. So yeah, that's psychological concierge. That's
And I
quite
love that.
American, I think. Yeah, it's not so popular in Britain, but concierge and psychological concierge is much more of an American thing. So are psychological autopsies, by the way. They're much more common in America than they are here in Europe.
And it looks like you offer telemedicine, so you can do remote sessions with people.
Yeah, many of my assessments these days in the in the psychological assessments are carried out using Doxy. Again, that's American software and it's excellent. A lot of doctors in the States use it for telemedicine. And I don't have shares in Doxy.me, by the way, but it is excellent. It really is.
Not a paid spokesperson. Okay, so where else should I go here, Kevin?
We talked about psychological autopsy. I have a number of contacts because my wife and I have spent periods of living in southern Spain. There are lots of retreats and rehab centers, international rehab centers for people who are dealing with addiction issues or overcoming trauma. And so where people are looking for that, I can make a referral and recommend them to rehab centers that I personally know of and that I have visited, not as an inpatient, but on a professional basis. So that's on that website as well.
And here we have at the bottom for expert witness services and your website, and then for coaching and medical Reiki. Tell us about that.
That's something that my wife does. I don't know a great deal about it, but she's a Reiki healer and she teaches Reiki courses. It's a Japanese form of healing which focuses on universal energy. And interestingly, that ties in with Qi Gong, because in Qi Gong, by doing the movements and managing the breath and managing the mind, we're helping to circulate positive Qi energy around the body to help prevent illness and distress. And Reiki works in a very similar way. It's a Japanese healing modality. So that's my wife's stuff, teresakhan.com. Yeah.
We'll have to have Teresa on one of our shows and get to know her as well.
I'm sure she would love to.
Okay, should we go over to general consultancy or register for courses?
General consultancy, that's basically where somebody wants to just get in touch with me and ask me, could I help out on whatever, designing staff training in mental health issues, dealing with group sessions, for example. So, from time to time, organizations and people get in touch with me as individuals and ask me a whole range of questions that would come under that kind of umbrella of general consultancy. And yeah, I'm always happy to do that as well.
And I see here, based on your background in social services, probation service, immigration removal centers, and Her Majesty's Prison Services, we have 4 or 5 shows right there, Kevin, just to find out more information about you and your work. And then finally, if we go over here to register for online Qigong classes via Zoom, how often are these offered?
There's usually an 8-week introductory course, so it's once per week for an hour or so, and we focus on one of the most famous, I think, set of movements in Qigong. It's called Baduan Jin in Chinese, and so we start those periodically, really, every 2 or 3 months, and they last for 8 weeks online, once per week. We have one coming up, I think, at the end of February is the next one.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this really important information with us. And
Sure,
as we
thank you.
close out, I always like to ask our guests, what would you like to leave our audience with today as a takeaway from this particular episode?
Oh, gosh. I think certainly be aware of how the way that we think impacts on the way that we feel. And also, I guess, because I hear lots of stories about people's experiences when things haven't gone so well, I think I would also say, be nice to ourselves, be nice to yourself, and be nice to each other as well.
Very nice way to end.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And Kevin, we'd love to have you on our corner bookstore. There's a number of other shows. I think you bring a lot of great value in areas here that we have not explored before. So I thank you.
Sure. Wonderful.
Not to mention the wise ones.
Yes, exactly. You could be on the show, The Wise Ones, later today.
That's another show within the USA Global TV and Radio Network, by the way.
Okay, The Wise Ones.
Yes. This week we have 27 shows. So we have all different topics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And
Busy, huh?
I stand for 27 hours. So
Yeah, your production engineer's going to be really busy.
Red, what's a great way for people to contact you, and what are the services that you offer?
Primarily, I'm a writer and an author. I can help people in both those areas. I also speak. I can do Zoom meetings for people out of town. I'm a publisher. So if you have a book, you think you have a book, you want to talk about it, those kinds of things I help people with all the time, especially Dr. JACALYN KERBECK. My contact information is found on my website, redolaughlin.com. That's red like the color, R-E-D, O'Laughlin, O-L-A-U-G-H-L-I-N. So O-L-A-U-G-H-L-I-N. So it's redolaughlin.com. My information is contained in there, contact information. Thank you, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you, Red. And before we go, can you let people know what you'll be discussing today as our expert presenter on Talking Heads?
Well, the plan today is, I believe, number 4 out of 6 on toxins. And we talk about toxins in health. We've been at the 30,000 foot level to start with. We came down last week into how do you actually find out what these things do. So my plan today is to go into a little bit more about actual products and being able to recognize the individual things in there that might be of concern to people. And if they're having a choice of this topic or this one or this product, which one makes more sense to them if they don't know anything about anything other than what they're just comparing.
All right. Thank you. I look forward to seeing that and to learning more. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Red. Thank you to each and everyone out there who's watching or listening on the live or in the replay coming forward. We really do appreciate you. Our next show is coming up. It's the Corner Bookstore, and we look forward to having you with us then. Thank you so much. We'll see you shortly. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You feel so frustrated. Why won't anybody hear what you have to say? You're filled with anxiety. You feel so isolated and alone. You're desperate for a connection with someone out there in a world that just seems to keep rushing by. Stop. You have a choice. Learn how to listen at an elevated level through the power of listening. Educational courses available on usaglobaltv.com. A world where you manifest everything you need and desire through the power of listening. The Power of Listening educational courses are available today for you to feel and know you have connected and you have been heard through elevated listening skills. The Power of Listening educational courses and children's books available today on usaglobaltv.com.
When we speak, we don't hear. It's abundantly clear. Listening lace is gripping, and and nobody's gonna win. Look someone in the eye. If you don't, they surely will cry. You don't hear a word I say, 'cause you always look straight away. Listening lazy, drive people crazy. Listening lazy, making us blue. Listening lazy, communication goes hazy. Listening lazy, listening lazy. Da 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 da. Listening lazy, drive people crazy. Listening lazy, making us blue. Listening lazy, communication goes hazy. Listening lazy, listening lazy. When you interrupt your friend, you will surely have to make amends. Lady Ella knows the way to help you listen better every day. And what's that? It's listening lazy. Ba-da-ba-ba. Listening lazy, drive people crazy. Listening lazy, making us blue. Listening lazy, communication goes hazy. Listening lazy, listening lazy. Listening lazy, drive people crazy. Listening lazy, making us blue. Listening lazy, communication goes hazy. Listening lazy, listening lazy, listening lazy.